Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're just, we'll get started here shortly and let folks join. We have 12 participants so far. Thanks to everyone joining us. If you're having any technological issues or any issues getting into the webinar, you should have a chat function at the bottom of your, or a question function at the bottom of your screen. And you can ask our project team a question and we can help you get oriented with the webinar. There's also a raise hand function if you need us to chat with you. Thanks for joining today, and we'll get started very quickly here. My name is Martha McClary. I'm with BNA Studios. Wow, we're hosting today's webinar. I'm joined by a full project team that we'll be introducing everyone to shortly. I'll be passing over to Ken shortly, and I'll just give a few housekeeping messages here. We'll just give 1 more minute for everyone to join. We are recording today's session. So I just wanted to mention, again, the functionality within Zoom. Today we're going to start with a presentation, and then following that, there's going to be opportunity for everyone to ask questions of the project team. If you'd like to speak your question, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you to ask your question. If you have a question you'd like to type, you can use the question function within the Zoom app. If you're having any technological issues at all, make sure you send us a question so we can help you. Today also, there's going to be lots of opportunity to ask questions of the full project team. So again, we're just going to ask that everyone keeps their comments respectful and short so we can get to as many questions as possible in this 1.5-hour session we have. And I'm going to pass over to Ken here to begin our presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Martha. And thanks for spending your lunch hour with us folks online. I guess we'll just start with some quick introductions. We have pretty much our full project team. There's a few of the consultants that aren't on the call, but we do have Rob Thomas and Ray McKay from Kineticor, from BNA Studios. So myself, obviously Martha, we have Leah on the call as well, and Marisa Cope from BNA. We have Catherine Agar and Deanna Romney from CASA Development Services. We have Brendan Stevenson from Watt Consulting, the transportation planner. And we have Dale Reinhardt from SEMA Plus. SEMA Plus led the preparation of the servicing and the stormwater management plan. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Per Shuchuk from Nichols Applied Management. They're the firm that did the fiscal impact assessment about the project. So what we're going to do, in fairness and respect of bandwidth, we're just going to have all the project team members turn off your cameras just while we give the presentation, so there's no lag or latency with the presentation. So again, yeah, as Martha mentioned, we're going to run you through some of the details about the project. In fact, this is sort of a preview of the public hearing presentation that we're going to be sharing with Rocky View County Council next Tuesday. In addition, of course, we do want to leave quite a bit of time at the end of the presentation for question and answers and to have a dialogue with you folks directly on the project. So, you know, we've been at this project officially since May. It's been you know, relatively fast pace of the project. We have had a chance to learn from probably a lot of you folks on the call and others that have participated in our engagement process to date. We've had you know, project websites. We did some online forums to solicit feedback. We had a community info session back in May. And there's been some meetings occurring throughout the summer, as well as the county's process with circulation. So we've learned a lot. Obviously, some concerns we're hearing from the folks and the agricultural community in the area. And by no means is this meant to be sort of an exhaustive list. I think we just wanted to summarize some of the themes of concerns we've been hearing about land use compatibility and the loss of agricultural land resulting from the project. We heard a lot about, the built form, concerns about the scale of the project, how it's going to fit in to the community with regards to buffering. Lots of questions about servicing, servicing being potable water service, wastewater service, or sanitary service, as well as stormwater management. We've heard environmental impacts, lots of discussion about traffic and traffic safety concerns, overall impacts to the community and the neighbors specifically surrounding the project area, and some concerns about the planning process and timeline. I should mention, and I apologize, I didn't introduce Aaron Latimer from Rocky View County. He's actually on the call as well. Aaron is the Director of Economic Development at Rocky View County, and I apologize for not referencing you, Aaron, in the introductions. So I think everybody's familiar with the project location and the context of the area surrounding the sites. Our site is about 1,100 acres. It's about 3 miles due east of the Balzac, or the East Balzac area, just outside the city of Calgary. I think, relatively and certainly predominantly agricultural character for the surrounding area, but the area is serviced with quite a bit of infrastructure, both regional and municipal. We'll talk about that. Highway 566 being the main transportation corridor east-west in and out of the area. Lots of agricultural activities and agricultural farms in the vicinity of our site, and definitely we want to make sure that we're hearing the concerns and trying to mitigate as best we can the project in that area. So, a lot of you might be asking, why this site? Why is Kineticor? Why are we looking at developing a data center complex at this location? And there's actually a number of variables and factors that make this site actually quite attractive for a data center complex that we're proposing. Certainly the scale of the project, it's, I think it might be difficult to assemble about 1,000 acres of land to accommodate the scale of the project that we're proposing. And we were able to, or Kineticor was able to do that. Certainly the transportation corridors that I mentioned, Highway 566, proximity to Stony Trail and Highway 2, the Deerfoot in the city. Also the planned future ring road, or the future regional bypass that we're showing here. Now this alignment hasn't been determined specifically by Alberta Transportation, but we know it's going to be somewhere in the vicinity east of the Balzac area structure plan. And it is obviously a relative and a valid consideration informing the location of our site. Servicing, the county has invested quite a bit in the water service in the area. I think everybody's familiar with the water treatment plant, which is kitty corner, about a mile from our site. Feeder mains servicing Balzac and Conrich, providing potable water to those communities running right by our project area. And of course, the regional grid, the electrical grid that runs north-south, the 240 kV lines that are directly adjacent to the west of our site. Having the ability to access a skilled labor force is really important and an essential necessity for this site, as well as the fact that there isn't really, we believe, isn't really an ability or a capacity for some of the existing county area structure plans to accommodate this scale of development with all of these variables factored into the equation. So, what is a data center complex? A data center, put simply, is a building that houses a number of computer systems to store, process data, and distribute it back onto the World Wide Web. In our case, we are proposing a data center complex. So multiple data center users are going to be locating in our project area. to take advantage of all the scale of transportation, servicing infrastructure, all of the ability to comprehensively plan a number of data centers to come into one location in a campus style setting. So this is just an illustration we found on the web of something that would be similar, certainly in scale and context, with perimeter roads, big, relatively large industrial buildings, and all the infrastructure needed to support that facility. So looking at our site itself, as I mentioned, in an area that's currently predominantly agriculture, we have a mix of agricultural soils in our site. It's probably 50-50, class 2, 3, and 50 class 1 soils. Those lines that we're showing are based off of the information we gained from the Government of Alberta SPIN website. Number of oil and gas facilities in our project area and pipelines that snake sort of through our site as well as throughout the surrounding area. We mentioned the 240 kV, the electrical transmission, the grid that's right directly west of our site. Number of natural drainages coming through the area, and we'll talk a little bit about that with regards to stormwater management. We did complete an environmental site assessment, a biophysical impact assessment, and a geotechnical assessment. All sort of concluded that the proposed use we're intending for the site is appropriate. The site is capable of supporting the use that we're proposing. So this is the concept. I think many of you have probably seen this before. We really haven't changed this concept much since we announced the project back in May. But what we're showing here is all of the purple. The light purple areas would, of course, be the data center users, pretty much on a quarter section by quarter section scale. We think there's going to be about 4 to 6 million square feet of industrial buildings in our footprint. We think about 800 to 1,500 employees at full build-out. We are not showing it here, but we do anticipate at some points in the project life cycle, we will require a power generation facility inside the footprint. But for the first few phases of the project, we will be pulling power directly from the grid, distributing the power through the project area in these sort of diagonally hatched right-of-way areas. The site will, of course, be serviced and appropriately provided infrastructure from a transportation, servicing, drainage perspective. We'll talk about that momentarily here, but also recognizing that the project will be completed in phases. Each one of the quarter sections we think will take 3 to 5 years to absorb fully. So the project will unfold over the fullness of time. 15 to 20 years is probably our estimate at this point, with lands that aren't currently or at that time needed for data center uses to be left in agricultural production. So we are proposing, I guess, a brand new land use district that Rocky V County Council have created in the land use bylaw. It's the Special Data Center District, or the SDAT. As planners like to use acronyms. You'll hear that throughout the process. So all of the purple area, again, that's the data centers and related uses, all governed by the SDAT district with a specific overlay that will be applied within the boundary of this area structure plan, specifically highlighting the types of uses, the building heights, the development requirements at each stage of the development that will be required. Things like site plans, servicing plans, landscaping plans, noise impact assessments, a whole bunch of more technical details specifically to each project within each quarter section to be provided subsequently through the development permit process. We have all the other infrastructure, the drainage infrastructure, the park space that we're proposing, a landscape buffer adjacent to the highway, will also have land use districts applied to them in accordance with the county's land use bylaw. So we did, obviously recognizing and acknowledging the potential impact for a project of this scale to the surrounding properties, the local properties physically tangent to our site. We, right off the top, created a commitment for an arbitrary 30-meter or 100-foot landscape buffer to completely surround the project area. And you can see here the different colors referencing sort of the edge conditions of our immediately adjacent neighbors. We have primarily agricultural neighbors, the green outline. We have a number of residences to the southwest and the northeast of our site. And of course, that highway buffer that I mentioned previously. So again, minimum 100-meter setback. The landscape buffer will be, a landscape plan will be prepared at the development stage to detail the specific type of plantings, sort of the undulations and topography. In the case of the highway interface, we'll be adding a pedestrian pathway into that interface. And wherever we can, wherever it's possible, we'll irrigate those landscape buffers with stormwater. We'll talk about that momentarily. And all of these buffers will be maintained by a business lot owners association. So it's really important for us, for Kineticor as the proponents of this plan. We didn't want to just produce a bunch of landscaping and then walk away and hope the county or someone else is going to maintain it. No, we'll be creating a lot owners association that will essentially take that obligation on in perpetuity to make sure that those landscape buffers are appropriately maintained and look nice through the duration of the project. So, we also heard a lot of concerns about, what are these buildings going to look like? How are we going to mitigate things like lighting, like fencing, noise, signage, and what we committed to, and there's a big policy section in the draft of the area structure plan that speaks to this. All of our building frontages that face existing building sites or public roads, we have an enhanced level of architectural design and standards. Some of these photos, this is actually a data center in Calgary. A lot of these other buildings, I think if anybody's driven by Balzac, you're familiar with the context. We didn't want to just have a big, flat, featureless plane of a building, especially given some of the scales of these structures, 200,000-300,000 square feet. So what we'll be doing is ensuring different materials, different elevations, different colors, and tasteful and selective use of glass treatments to break up the bulk of these buildings and along the long frontages of the public roads. And again, as I mentioned, those frontages facing some of our existing neighbors who are living in proximity to us. So we will be ensuring that outside storage, parking, loading areas, any of the mechanical facilities associated with the data centers will be placed and situated out of view, again, from the public roads and the adjacent building sites. Dark sky compliant lighting, not shown on the bullets here, but each of the data centers will have to prepare noise impact assessments at the development stage to ensure that the noise control or the noise generated by these facilities meets the noise control bylaw of Rocky V County. Signage, fencing, all of those things coordinated between the data center sites. And of course, there'll be architectural controls registered against each title at the development stage. Transportation was another big concern. We heard from a lot of the folks about some of the concerns existing on Highway 566, from an agriculture perspective, moving equipment on the highway. We heard and acknowledged those concerns. A project of this scale does have to require a traffic impact assessment to take a look at the existing regional and municipal transportation network servicing this area, evaluate the impact that the project is expected to have on that infrastructure, and ensure appropriate mitigations are put in place to address those things. So the traffic impact assessment, or the TIA, again, that acronym, was reviewed both by the county and Alberta Transportation. They have jurisdiction, of course, on Highway 566, passing by the front of our project area. And the conclusions and the mitigations that we propose in that TIA have been endorsed by both the county and the province. And we can talk about that at the Q&A. But from when you go down to the local perspective, a number of things are going to happen. We're going to be obviously upgrading the two range roads shown in orange. We'll be providing internal subdivision roads that are shown in blue. For security purposes, these internal roads will be privately owned and maintained. In fact, we expect there'll be gates at the main entrance to each one of these data center sites, again, to provide that security. We'll have emergency accesses provided back from the internal roads to the county range roads. Those are those yellow dotted lines. And of course, intersection upgrades at each of the range road. We're obviously starting the developments on the west side of the area. We'll talk about that. But this intersection specifically, we heard quite a bit of concern about grades, elevations, and vehicles climbing the hill and poor sight lines at this location. So, we have committed to putting signals in at that intersection as part of the first phase of the project. And there'll be lots of detailed engineering and design work that's going to be necessary to ensure that the configuration of this intersection includes appropriate pass-through lanes, left turn, right turn lanes as appropriate. And we can talk a little bit more about what that process moving forward. All of the improvements required to provide access to this project area will be provided by the developer. So again, we're not looking for any investment from the county. Levies will be paid, and of course, the road improvements will be implemented in phases with levies paid to the county at each stage of development. Same with water. We talked about the water treatment plants and the fact that we have the infrastructure, the critical regional infrastructure in place. We do expect to be pulling water into the site, having a reservoir constructed within the footprint of the area by the developer to service the plan area and all of the phasing associated with it. When we come down to the site itself, you can see here, of course, once the water gets to our site in the reservoir, it'll be distributed through a system of looped mains, all again provided by the developer. Everything's designed by the engineering team in accordance with the county servicing standards. We will have to design this facility to provide fire suppression, particularly because of the size of the buildings. There's a very strict requirement under the building code for fire suppression. And we have done some preliminary analysis of water usage and expected consumption. And we understand that our project, the county system, has more than enough capacity to deal with the water demands of our project. We can talk about that. Same thing from a wastewater. Proximity to the county's wastewater transmission line is a locational attribute that was attractive or attract Kineticor to this area. We are proposing a lift station within the footprint of the plan with a force main that will extend west and eventually south to connect to the existing force main at a location just directly north and west of Prairie Rail Estates. Coming down to the site itself, again, a series of gravity mains installed by the developer that will convey all of the wastewater to the lift station to be conveyed back to the county's regional system. Again, everything being designed and constructed by the developer as per the appropriate standards in place and levies to be paid at the development or the subdivision stage. Stormwater management was another concern, particularly the folks that have lands upstream and downstream of our project. Our engineers took that to heart and did a master drainage plan for our project to look at the ability for us to grade and convey all of the surface drainage created by the development or needed by all the roofs, all the hard surfaces, all the roads within our project will be conveyed to a stormwater facility to be constructed at one of the low points in our project. Everything kind of drains naturally from west towards the east. And because we don't have a creek or a river or a downstream discharge ability. We have to irrigate about 200 acres of our footprints we're holding back. We're not going to be developing that area, and in doing so provides us the opportunity to irrigate with the stormwater, the treated stormwater coming out of the pond onto that 200-acre area. Again, it's very important to understand that the province has policies that require pre and post development characteristics to remain the same. So, we are going to be leaving this drainage intact as best we can. We will be obviously interrupting this drainage here, but conveying it through the internal conveyance system within our footprint. But the amount of water off site coming through our project and the amount of water leaving our site will remain consistent, and we can talk about that if you have questions. Any of the existing wetlands, any of the existing flora fauna that's in our project area that we have to disturb as a result of this development can and only will proceed in accordance with the Alberta Water Act and the provincial wetland policies. Again, we can talk about that if you have questions. So I talked about phasing. The green areas are shown our first phase of development. You might ask why these kind of weird boundaries. We obviously have to grade out and construct the portion of the range road, including the intersection. It's really this phase or this portion of the development that will have data center uses occur initially. But because we have to grade out the stormwater pond, as well as placing some fill onto this quarter section right here, we decided to include all of the phase one as a phase 1A, phase 1B. And then future developments would occur as we anticipate in accordance with the phasing or the sequencing that we show here. Again, I mentioned 3 to 5 years per phase, about a 15 to 20 year build out. Each the developer, whether it's Kineticor or the future data center user, will have to prepare a master site development plan prior to the phases 2 through 5 proceeding. So just making a commitment to the community that there will be more opportunities for consultation occurring at each phase of the project. And last but not least, a project of this scale, I think it's important to acknowledge, the potential impacts, the positive impacts financially this project could bring to Rocky View County. The fiscal impact assessments that we've prepared, a whole bunch of charts and data in that report that I won't try to explain. It's beyond my pay grade. But the key takeaway here is very conservative estimate of the non-residential assessment that this project could and will bring to the county, probably in the range of a minimum of $4 billion. So you assign the 2024 mill rate to that number, and it's a number with a lot of zeros attached to it in terms of the ability for the county to potentially offset tax increases to the agriculture community, opportunities to fund other services and infrastructure that the county need overall. That's a council decision. That's not something that Kineticor or the data center users can influence. But certainly I think it's important to understand the scale of this project and the scale of potential fiscal benefits that this project could bring to Rocky View as a county as a whole. So that's kind of brings us to the end of the formal presentation. We are in a process. We have been in a process that began in earnest back in May with council adopting in terms of reference to outline the plan or the ASP preparation process. We've been following that process, all the statutory requirements associated with that. We did prepare the draft of the area structure plan, submitted that to the county back in July, and the county's been reviewing that. You've all been part of that process, and of course we have that public hearing upcoming next Tuesday. So Martha, back to you. You've heard me blab along long enough, and let's hear what people have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. So that's concluding our formal presentation portion for today's webinar. The project team is online and they're pop back up as questions are asked, but I do want to take a minute just to share how you can participate or ask your questions. So you can raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can speak your question to the project team. You can also type your questions into the chat or into the Q&A function at the bottom of your app. So within Zoom, there's a question and answer function. So if you drop your question in there, it'll be queued up to be responded to. We did have a comment come in. I'll just queue up Daryl and Ken for the stormwater topic. That was one of the first comments that came through during our presentation. So that'll be our first question to kick things off. But please do put up your hand, drop questions in, and we're really happy to take your questions and respond. So just for those of you who might also be joining us this evening, we are having this presentation as well this evening at the Delacour Community Hall. It's going to be the same presentation Ken just provided, same Ken leading us through the presentation, and the project team will be on hand as well to same format style of event. We'll go through the presentation, and then following the presentation, we'll pause to take answers from attendees. So the comment came in, Daryl, who undertook the stormwater and servicing studies. Just a comment came in about the fact that, you know, not always is there water for irrigation. So there's not always irrigation and stormwater storage happening, considering in the past we have been in a drought condition for the last few years. Did you want to make a comment or add to that at all, Daryl, about the comment that came through our question function?
So for clarity, the comment is about what do we do when there's not stormwater in the pond?
Yeah, the state, yeah, it's more of a sort of a general comment about the state of drought in the recent years. This is a wetter than average recent year. So yeah, what would happen, I guess, in the case where there isn't water for irrigating?
Well, I mean, I guess the short answer would be that they're the same thing that would happen pre-development, right? I mean, we size the ponds running a continuous model over with information from a 30-year period. So we size based on a prescribed average storm with a required amount of storage volume and a discharge rate that meets pre-development flow and volume. So we are retaining the delta between the pre and post development. That water can be irrigated on an as needed basis or to help manage the pond volumes. So that is to say that there is potentially going to be water in the pond from previous months or years that has not been irrigated in a wet season that could be utilized in a dry season. But I guess because we're restricted on how much we're allowed to release, so we size the pond assuming that we have this delta difference between them. So that provides us with a bit of a backup of water.
Yeah. Thanks, Daryl. And while you're on, we did have another question about groundwater and the potential impacts this project of this scale might have on groundwater. Would you like to make a comment on that or provide some context for the water sources for this project?
Yeah, so I'm not a hydrogeologist, so I can't comment specifically on groundwater. For potable water, we will be using treated water from the Graham Water Reservoir, Rocky County treatment plant there. That reservoir is fed by mostly surface runoff water. We will be contributing to that surface runoff at a pre-development rate. Rocky County has water license in place. We will be filling our on-site reservoir with treated water from the capacity. So water demand from this development will not be impacting groundwater. As far as how it's impacted from changing from farmland to a developed area, like I said, we will be discharging at the pre-development rate. So surface runoff that would have been going to the reservoir will still be going to the reservoir. Water that would have been used by crops is now going to be stored in our pond. So, you know, we'd have to defer to the geotech and hydrogeologist, but there's not anticipated impact to groundwater.
Yeah. Thanks, Daryl. We did have a general question come in about getting access to this recording today. We will be posting this recording to our project website, so it will be available. to everyone. So thanks for that question as well coming in. We had a couple questions come in about power generation. So perhaps Ray and Rob, if you don't mind turning on your cameras and jumping in. And Ken, and perhaps we can start first with just a general overview of maybe what is considered, what's being considered at site. So there was a question that came in about the project plan mentions a rather large 1,000 megawatt power station. And what is the time frame for this plant?
I can take that. Hello, everyone. We haven't committed yet to building the power plant on this site. However, the ISO has recently announced that future data centers will need their own generation. That's not necessarily behind the fence generation, but generation they can associate with the load growth. So it is looking more realistic that there will be a power plant on this site. In terms of timeline, it will take a while. A power plant does take significantly longer to build than a data center. So we're probably looking at an in-service date of 2032 at the earliest for that facility. Perhaps 2031, but more likely 2032.
Thanks. And maybe while you're still on, we did have a couple other questions about just the general power generation at the site.
Yep.
So there's a comment about, what will be sort of the sustainability plan, or what will be the carbon footprint of this particular site. That there is, the amount of power that is required does have an impact. And so have there been any assessments done in terms of that study?
So currently there's proposed federal regulations that would require a power plant to be not net zero, but very, very close. And those regulations are completely finalized yet, but we'd certainly be following those when they come in. And I can tell you how that would be done. In Alberta, we do have the advantage of having carbon capture availability, and that technology is well advanced. We've studied it on other facilities. We haven't studied it specifically for this one yet, but we've studied it on very similar facilities. So carbon capture, definitely a possibility for Alberta. And then the other one might be hydrogen as a fuel, but that's probably secondary right now to the carbon capture option.
Okay, thanks. A couple questions came in, and a second part to that question as well about the future protection of wells and groundwater wells on neighboring properties. Will there be any type of monitoring that will be in place? And this might jump in, Ken, in terms of process as well with the county. Will there be any types of monitoring of adjacent water wells going forward as the project develops?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Daryl mentioned, and I'll preface my answer as I'm a planner, not an engineer. So, but I think that because this entire data center complex is to be sort of conventionally serviced with pipes, we aren't anticipating the need to go into the aquifer or the aquifers of many of the wells surrounding our site, the domestic wells, both for household use and agricultural use as well. So we aren't anticipating the need for monitoring, unlike for example an aggregate project, to pull a reference where there's mining that's happening into the ground, approaching, if not even hitting the water table. Those kind of projects do have water monitoring requirements and commitments as a best practice. But in this case, because we're essentially pulling water from the Graham Reservoir to our reservoir, the Kineticor Reservoir, and then having that water distributed internal to the site, we aren't anticipating any negative impact to the surrounding well users. So if that's something that council, as a future or the development authority at Rocky View administration wanting a groundwater monitoring program to be put in place as part of a future approval, I guess we could consider that at that point. But at this stage, it's not something that we believe is necessary for us to monitor, because we're not going to be impacting it.
Okay, thanks. I'll just, Aaron, if perhaps if you can unmute yourself and start your video. There was a question that came in. I do believe I'll send this question first to Ken. The attendee, Laura, thanks, Laura, for your question, asked that this might be more of a question for Rocky View, but I think I'll give it to Ken to start. The question is, how come this isn't in commercially zoned land or pilot land that's already deemed appropriate for commercial? Why are we taking agricultural land is the question. And the question we've been asked throughout the project since the start and since the announcing. So.
Yep. No, it's an excellent question and a very fair and I think a relevant question. You know, when it comes to the location for Kineticor choosing this 1,000 or 1,100 acre site, you know, a number of variables come into play. As I mentioned, proximity to servicing, proximity to regional transportation, regional workforce. But you see this last bullet. You know, when you take a look at, even for example, take a look at East Balzac, which is the sort of this tan or taupe color. You might not realize, but a lot of, if not almost all of the business or land that's earmarked for business use in Balzac has already been planned. It's actually already being under the process of development for transportation, distribution, warehousing. Further to the south, you have areas like Conrich, Janet, and the new Prairie Gateway project that the county recently approved. A lot of those areas, again, are specifically designed and expected to accommodate certain types of industry, none of which is data center uses. Data centers, and Aaron may have something to say about this, it's a very new sector that the province has recently announced as an objective. You know, about 800 billion of new money is expected to come into the province by 2030, I believe. I may have those numbers wrong. There's no hard, fast set rule of where these uses should go. So this is, you know, our strategy with putting this area structure plan together is acknowledging that the trade-off will be some of this agricultural land is unavoidably going to be impacted. We believe we've done our level best to try to create a strategy to mitigate as best we can the negative impacts, leveraging all of those infrastructure investments that I talked about, from servicing transportation from both the county and the province's perspective, and the fiscal benefits coming back to the municipality and the region overall. So a bit of a long answer, Martha, to the question. And Aaron, I don't know if you have anything further to add on that.
No, thank you very much for the question, and Ken, an excellent answer with respect to why the site is strategically important, with, of course, the acknowledgement that it is in fact taking up some productive agricultural land out of service, which is a concern for the county as a whole, and it has to be weighed against the the longer term economic impacts that the project can bring to the county. And to reiterate your point, Ken, with respect to existing lands that have been allocated for commercial and industrial development, many of those lands have been fully planned out, and which leaves opportunities for further development in productive agricultural land.
Thanks, Aaron. And I'm going to get you to stay on and just queuing up the rest of the project team. Piers, we're coming to you next with some questions about the fiscal elements of the project, and then some more questions are coming in about water. So I appreciate all the questions. A reminder to those that are online, that are our participants, you can submit your questions through the Q&A function within your Zoom app. We're also getting some questions in the chat, which is just fine. I just want to make it can be a little bit easier to filter through the questions in the Q&A chat. So make sure you're dropping them in, or raise your hand if you would like to speak with the project team. So we had a question come in for Rocky View County, which I think, Ken, you also might want to support a bit in answering. With this, or in terms of the zoning, we have a question about the zoning. We'll start with the general question about, with this unique zoning, how many more of these sites can Rocky View County expect in your community? That's to Aaron.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Ken previously, addressed it in a little bit, that this is a new initiative by the government of Alberta, where they are looking at attracting this emerging technology sector called data centers. Data centers house both computing power for artificial intelligence processing, and then they also are for cloud storage. And with the global demand growing, the government of Alberta acknowledged that there was an opportunity for these types of projects to locate in Alberta for a number of reasons, including our cold climate, our electrical generation capacity, although future generation will be required, that was previously noted. So the government looked at it and said, look, we think this is an opportunity for economic development in the province of Alberta. And so, we're reacting to that sort of interest from those parties around the world for data center locations, specifically relating to future development opportunities on Rocky County. It is difficult to determine how many of these sites may exist in the future. There are some indicators out there that the global demand for AI computing is going to continue to grow, and therefore sites across Alberta will likely be in view for the development of these types of projects.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. And Pierce, coming to you with some of our financial assessment questions. And yeah, thanks, Ken, for flipping to that point in the slide. So during the presentation, we stated that the assessment base for this proposed development would be $4.7 billion. Can you quantify the actual mill rate, which I would assume will produce the figure of actual tax revenue to Rocky County per year?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So just to clarify kind of at a high level, the approach we took is we imagined the municipal corporation in 2024 with and without the project at full build out. And we calculated budget balancing mill rates in those two scenarios and compared them. The assumption being that when the project is fully built out, it will contribute to the assessment base, the non-residential base, the project itself, and it will also create growth in the residential assessment base as individuals who may be employed at the project located in the county. It will also increase the need for certain services extended by the municipality. And so we drag forward kind of the non-tax revenues and expenditures associated with the project, and then add to the assessment base the project amount, and hypothetically balance the budget. And when we do that, we see mill rates that are about 15% lower than the 2024 mill rates. And that we take as the key indicator of a fiscal positive fiscal impact, is that in the scenario where we have the project, the mill rates across the board for all property classes are lower as compared to what they are today. And again, I think as Ken touched on in his presentation, the assumption we're making there is that council priorities don't shift. It could be the case that council chooses to alter its service mixture or standard, and that outcome varies from what we've assumed. But as an illustration of what the potential positive impact could be, we've assumed kind of all else equal, and made that calculation to determine that mill rates would be about 15% lower.
Thanks. And a secondary point to this person's question, they're interested in the actual proposed property tax revenue per year, as well as comparison to the total Rocky County revenue budget. Would that be something?
That's something I don't have at my fingertips because of the method that I just walked you through. We were very focused on the budget balancing, right? That's certainly a calculation we could make with the information that we have. Doing math in front of a lot of people,
yeah, that's right.
Online is not my strong suit. That's a great way to break into cold sweat. So I'd be happy to make that calculation and share the figures offline.
Okay. And if you just want to stay on, and maybe Aaron too, if you want to come back for some of the next questions, some of these are a bit more comments, but I do want to acknowledge them for the whole, all the attendees today. I guess that one person has a sort of a comment about the potential that Rocky County is in a conflict of interest with regards to evaluating a project that has such significant financial generation and income. I guess maybe would you like to speak to that, Aaron, about maybe the process at council when it comes to evaluating projects such as these?
Certainly. Maybe I can go to the lower question with respect to federal provincial funding. At this point, there is no applications for grants underway to support this project. So for either federally or provincially. So that to my knowledge, there's no additional financial support being sought by the county for this particular project. And then with respect to the conflict of interest, I think that council, obviously it's fully at the discretion of council to assess the value of a project such as this, both from the fiscal and economic impacts that Pierce has just identified, as well as diversifying the economic output of the county from just warehousing and so on, from the current split to adding technology and innovation to the mix for the county. So that's another evaluation. But the council would, I assume, undertake in evaluating a project such as this in terms of its long-term economic benefits to the county.
Okay, thanks. And maybe sticking with that too, I guess for the project team, another question came through the question function within Zoom. A little bit similar, but just to reiterate the answer, what tax and other incentives have been given to this developer to encourage them to locate an RBC? So just to clarify.
Yeah, thank you, Martha, and thank you for the question. To my knowledge, there has been no, and it would be publicly available if there was any incentives provided to the developer for this project. To my knowledge, there has been none supplied to the developer for this project.
Okay, thank you. Again, maybe sticking, Aaron, just since you're on as well, get back to the question of how many data centers, this commenter, mentioned that Beacon was just approved, and how many more do we need considering data center clients have yet to be identified? Did you want to speak to that, Aaron, or perhaps even Rob or Ray, if you wanted to jump on with your knowledge of the industry?
Yeah, I think I would answer that question, and it is a very fair question. We would go back to some of the international market assessments that have been done for the growing data center technology sector, and the global demand indicators, those that study and analyze those global demands for the computing power and the cloud storage. Indicate that globally that the demand is going to continue to grow quite substantially over the next several years. So that is really a market-driven analysis, but the reports that we've reviewed would indicate that the global demand will continue to grow.
Ray, a bit of a follow-up to that. I think I'll pass over to you to answer a question on the phasing, maybe the data center clients that will be coming into phasing, particularly that this commenter, Brenda, has mentioned that they have been yet to be identified, and they haven't come to the table to talk specifically about data center functions. And similarly, another question, you have said before that phase 1 is sold. Can we tell us who and about who they would be?
Sure. Yeah. So on the phasing, this is a park. We've envisioned this as a park, not a single client facility, but a park. So we're envisioning a number of the data center clients would eventually be using this facility. So that's why they haven't been identified, is because we don't know who will be some of the future clients. However, the organization interested in phase 1A and B is eStructure. They have told us that they're happy to use their name, and they will be presenting on the 9th in front of council in support of the project. So eStructure has a number of 2 operating facilities in Rocky View, I believe now a 3rd developed, and this would be their 4th.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question? Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Ray.
Yeah.
Oh, question actually, no, we'll just follow up while we have you on the line. A question of, is the plan for the cooling at the data center still air cooling? And if you wanted to follow up to clarify that,
Yeah.
Ray.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, it's a cooling is a difficult cooling and as associated with water use is difficult. As I said, it's a park. We don't know who the future clients will be. There'll be different applications. We understand different applications have different requirements. The technology is improving very rapidly, both on the efficiency of the processor, which reduces the amount of cooling required, and on the cooling technology itself. So it is difficult to assess. However, it is possible that some facilities will require water for cooling. Now, those systems are not typically what you call once through, where the water just is used once. They're often recycled, and that is, we believe, the case for at least one of our clients. So a closed loop, or there's other air conditioning type systems that can be used to reduce it. And I can say the industry itself takes this very seriously. A lot of them, as an industry group, set goals for reducing their water consumption. And just by virtue of being in Alberta helps significantly reduce their water consumption for cooling or any cooling costs, even air, as compared to in the United States. And then I believe also, the future developments will require future water demand assessments. So we'll be able to assess whether or not that's viable water use at that time.
Okay, thanks. And Ken, perhaps I'll just get you to stay on. We had a comment, and I do want to mention it. It's more of a comment, just regards to the fact that the sentiment from this participant is that it makes them sad that farmers who feed communities in the world at large are having land taken away for other businesses and other opportunities. And we just, as a project team, want to acknowledge that we have heard that feedback throughout engagement. We do take it seriously. And it is a bit of an opportunity also to talk about maybe some of the other another question that has come up. And so I'll pass it over to you, Ken, in a minute. In terms of, are there opportunities in terms of the types of waste heat that's being considered? Is there any opportunities through the rezoning for ag opportunities? So I wanted to pass it over to you, Ken.
No, great question, and definitely appreciate the sentiment. I don't think Kineticor, I don't think anybody on this project team is interested in harming their agricultural community intentionally. I think that the all of the reasons why we've chosen this site, if it were all class 3 soils or worse, we would gladly take that. But this was the site that was available, and Kineticor was able to negotiate the ability to purchase it. So, there is obviously opportunities, what we call co-locate opportunities. You have a situation where an industrial use, quasi-industrial use, is creating infrastructure for water, for energy, and for heat generation. Clearly, there's potential to, perhaps offset the loss of arable land, class 1, class 2 soils, through intensification of other agricultural uses. I'm thinking squarely on, even the irrigated lands within our footprint will have the potential to have an increase in the capacity of that site, but also, both within and adjacent to our site, we are investigating and have made accommodations in the plan for that kind of use, the value added agricultural uses that we are aware of the master plan, the agricultural master plan, and the intent is wherever we can. Kineticor is interested in partnering with other users, other industries that could take advantage. Again, whether it's inside our footprint or on lands in direct proximity to our site, to accommodate that use. So, again, another long answer to the short question is, there is definitely potential, and I know Kineticor is open to the idea, as the initiator of this project, to facilitate or help partner with other potential agricultural operators to intensify the land use opportunity of their sites.
Thanks. I'll get you to stay on, Ken, and I'll invite Daryl to join again. We're heading over to some of the water questions that have come back up since we last chatted on the call. I'll just do a bit of a housekeeping item. We still have most of you that are sticking with us through to 1:30. We're going to do our best to get to all the questions that are submitted by 1:30. Our project team has a bit of a tight turnaround to our in-person event this evening, but we can go a little bit past if needed. But a reminder to everyone, we are recording the session if you need to leave and come back and revisit the content. So we do have a couple questions about water, so I'll sort of jump around a bit between the Q&A window and as well as the chat window, just for my panelists. We had a question about, isn't the basin closed to water licenses? You may have spoken about this already, but where will your water come from exactly? So just, first question on water that came through.
I guess the domestic or potable water demand that we're anticipating based on the 1,500 maximum or high level estimate of employees at the full build out is going to draw relatively low demand. We're in the range of 68 plus or minus cubic meters a day. Rocky View County's treatment plant and reservoir has that capacity available to provide to domestic use. If we're talking about water demand for cooling, as was already answered, I mean, there's some variability there, but honestly, a closed loop system, what we would be doing is planning for some fill events where we would size our reservoir accordingly. We could trickle fill it over time to plan for these instances where they may have to fill a cooling system with say a couple thousand cubic meters of water, again within the range of water that's available under Rocky View's current plant capacity and available water.
So Daryl, we're going to keep on that topic because the question around does Rocky View County have the correct amount of water has come in a few different ways. So there might be a bit of repetition here for everyone, but just to clarify, if Kineticor is anticipating water cooling, so uses at site, has our modeling considered that water cooling demand as well beyond just toilets and humidifiers and things like that?
So as far as the actual amount of water that Rocky View County has license and treatment capacity for, that's not necessarily publicly available information. The way the process works is we submit a demand analysis for what we anticipate the entire project uses. Rocky View County reviews that and provides us feedback on if the water is available or not. They don't let us know exactly what their capacities are. At every stage of development for every subdivision, we would have to update what we assume that capacity is. And then once the subdivision process is done and lots are created and an end user comes in, they have to submit a development permit. And again, they would have to give more detail on what their demand would be. And if any one of these milestones, Rocky View comes back and says, we don't have that water for you, then one of two things happens. Either they say, through the development team or the county, they secure additional license. If the gate is treatment capacity in the plant, it could be upgrades to the treatment plant, or alternatively, the application gets denied and the applicant would have to go back and propose a different method of cooling that doesn't use as much water.
And thanks, Daryl. And again, some of this might be a bit repetitive, but we're getting this question a few different ways. So I want to make sure there's no more, or there's some clarity on it. And so essentially, we did have another question come in around, is there a risk that creep will continue at this site, that just more and more will continue to be demanded? But as you mentioned, there are going to be checks and balances along the way. So do you want to maybe reiterate that?
Yeah, and then even once the end user is operational, they sign an agreement with Rocky View County that commits to a certain amount of water usage. If they end up using more, which Rocky View County monitors through their metered, a meter at every end user. If they're using more than they've been allocated, there is penalties and steep fines in Rocky View's policy, and they can go and shut off water to that user.
Okay, thanks. And then there's a bit of a question that came in, maybe clarifying a couple different servicing components. This person was asking for clarification on what we mean when we said that the water coming in and leaving this proposed project will remain consistent. I believe at that time we were speaking about stormwater, so a bit of confusion because I think this participant was thinking we meant the recycling of potable water. So maybe just to clarify.
Yeah, I think I was speaking more to the stormwater in terms of water, like rain, say that falls in the area pre-post development. What's discharging from our site will be the same.
Right.
There, as I mentioned before, not a hydrogeologist, but I understand that there is some potential, obviously, for some water that would have gotten into the groundwater pre-development that isn't directly entering the groundwater at this location, but the discharge is still the same water that's used through potable uses, ultimately gets treated in Langdon, discharged back into Weed Lake once treated. So, as net neutral as any development would be.
Thanks, Daryl. If there are any more water, we have had a lot of water conversations. So if on this call, if there's anything else, please do drop it in the chat because we want to make sure the information we're providing is clear and accurate. So I appreciate the nuance from all the questions we've received so far. Thanks for submitting them. I just going back, we have touched on this a bit, but Ken, a question came in from one of our attendees. Have we thought about using the heat and stormwater for greenhouse agriculture? Has that been considered?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about, and some of those more sort of sustainable value-added agricultural practices. If you take a look at the area structure plan and some of the policies that we've put in place to actively encourage that type of use, if you have the ability to capture and reuse the heat, the power, and even the stormwater, you have all, I think, plus the transportation network, you have all the ingredients necessary to produce a commodity from an agricultural perspective that could be sent back to market. So at least in my mind, that's exactly the type of value-added agriculture uses that could be successful both within and adjacent to the project area.
Thanks. We do have a couple more questions that have come in. We have a question about, just to prepare the project team so they're ready to turn on their cameras. We have a question about wetlands and another question about power generation at the site and a question about Kineticor. So perhaps maybe Ray or Rob, you don't mind just joining again to take this question. And can you share a little bit more about Kineticor? Who is Kineticor? Who owns it? And maybe some of your existing business in the province.
Sure, yeah. So Kineticor is privately held. Its ownership is relatively broad, but privately held. Alberta company. Our primary asset is the Cascade Generating Station, which, and I should say Kineticor is an asset manager. So we develop, build, and operate infrastructure for other clients. We developed the Cascade Generating Station, which is a 900 megawatt facility in Edson, outside of Edmonton. Developed it, constructed it, and now operate it on behalf of its investors. Now, the investors for that plant are pension funds, primarily Canadian pension funds, and that's typically our client for ultimate investment. We don't know who at this point in time, but so that's kind of a little bit about Kineticor. A very small company based in Calgary. Been around about 10 years. I think Rob's been with them the whole time. I've been only 3 years.
Thanks, Ray. A couple questions, Ken, I'll start with you if Marie Sarnon wants to join. There's a question about what is the plan for the wetlands on site? Will they be replaced elsewhere, or is Kineticor choosing to pay fees to the province? What's the wetland plan?
I can answer that one. So wetlands within this site, there's some of the wetlands will be disturbed as part of this project. So all of the wetland function that is lost as a result of this project, the wetland area as well will be compensated, work together with the province to provide mitigation for that. So funds are provided to the province. The province then uses those funds to create wetland functions. Their goal is to create it within a similar area, but those funds will go to the province, and the province will have the responsibility of recreating those wetland functions.
Thanks, Marisa. And while you're here, stay on the line because this is I appreciate David sharing this story in question. That when he was young in the area many years ago, that his family showed him stone circles and left from encampments, from Indigenous encampments long ago. And he's wondering what process we've undertaken for archaeological surveys and the historical resource assessments, and if they've been conducted.
Yes, so thanks for that question. We have done some historical resources work within the site. And we will definitely be following provincial guidelines to get clearance on all archaeological resources prior to construction within the site. So we are following the required procedure from the province in order to make sure that that we're not disturbing anything that we haven't looked at, and being respectful of the archaeological elements that may or may not be on site.
Catherine, did you want to jump in, Catherine, or?
No, I think Marisa covered it all. And, you know, if we have to do sweeps before we start any construction. But if for some reason during construction something is unearthed, there's very stringent restrictions in place that everything has to be stopped, and we follow provincial guidelines.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll maybe just get Marisa to state just if you, and maybe Aaron, you might need to jump on again or answer this question. Or has been a question come up around the reclamation of the land. So is there any money held in trust for reclaiming the land if the project does not continue? Is there any mitigations for the impacts to agriculture that might come or that might come over the coming years? So is there any kind of I guess funds that are held back?
So I'll start this question, and I think it's going to be a multi-part answer. So there is some oil and gas infrastructure within the site. And so any disturbance to that oil and gas infrastructure would require restoration, reclamation, mitigation under the provincial guidelines that those projects were approved under. So that's one part of the answer. So that's specific to the oil and gas infrastructure that's on site. I see Daryl has his hand up, so I will look to him.
Yeah, maybe just to expand on that, I mean, once it gets past detailed design and all approvals are in place, whether it's stripping and grading or building roads or sewers, the county, as part of the development agreement that Kineticor will sign with the county, has to post a letter of credit or security that is a calculation based on percentage of estimated construction costs, and they hold that until construction is complete. If for whatever reason the developer defaults on their agreement or the project stops, the county can use those funds to reclaim the site.
You know, and maybe I'll add, and certainly not to prejudice or overcommit a future council of Rocky View as a result of this project. And as Pierce mentioned, you know, under a sort of a neutral, I'm probably using the wrong term, but all other financial considerations being equal, with and without this project and the benefits it could bring to the county, you know, there could be an overall tax decrease, emphasize could, which, you know, could be used to support the agricultural sector or the community at large. If Rocky View Council decided to use the increase in tax assessment to fund other services, you know, through the ag field service group at the county or others, you know, I think those are options that become available to the county to, you know, if they look at this project as, you know, asking or expecting the agriculture community to bear some of the burden, then there's, you know, potentially can and should be a reward coming back from the benefits provided. So again, sort of a loose or ethereal answer, but I think that there is an opportunity there. And I would encourage you all to talk to your council about that should this project get approved.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. We have another question on water. So I'm just gonna get Daryl back on. And I appreciate I think I did do a call for clarifying questions. So a question on how are we defining stormwater? Is that not the water that would fall naturally onto the 1,000 plus acres and need runoff that is no longer being absorbed by the site, as it does with agricultural usage? Do you want to just add some clarification to that, Daryl?
Yeah, stormwater is, yes, the water that would fall on site by rain. I'd have to get back to you with an exact number, but obviously agricultural uses when land's being farmed, not as much water gets into the ground as you would assume because the plants use a lot of the water. But I could get a number from someone and provide it sort of offline. But yes, stormwater is water that falls from the sky and drains off.
So clarification, on question, just, where is the potable water? Where's the proposed water that is going to be used for site operations? Where is that being brought onto, or from? Where is that being brought from?
So Rockview County owns and operates a treatment plant there just by Graham Reservoir, which is made up of surface runoff. So I can see where there is some of the maybe confusion, the difference between stormwater and potable water. Obviously, potable water is treated water that's gotten either from the aquifer, from water bodies, rivers, lakes, stormwater runoff. I mean, it's all part of the greater water cycle, but when we're talking about demands and usage, we manage them differently.
Thanks. And once potable water is used at the site, how will it be treated? Where does that go? Just for clarification.
Once potable water is used, it is collected through a sewer system, pipe sewer system, similar to in any city or municipality, to a centralized sanitary lift station, which will then pipe through a force main, ultimately ending up in Langdon at the wastewater treatment plant that's owned and operated by Rockview County. Once it's treated, then it gets discharged to Weed Lake adjacent to the plant.
Thanks, Daryl. Appreciate the clarifying questions that are coming in. So if there are any more, keep them coming. We have a few more minutes left on this webinar. Okay, so someone who, this is coming in from a participant who attended our open house that was in June. So there was a comment at the previous open house that due to building code requirements, there would be far more parking than required for the number of employees actually working at the data center at any given time. With all those parking lots, come security lighting, and what is the design plan to minimize light pollution that's going to be generated from the area? So Ken, I'll maybe pass it to you to start off.
Great question. A couple layers in the answer. You know, fundamental, I think, to the success and the desire of data center users and operators is security. You know, so the idea of their facilities being lit up so you can see them from space, I say that facetiously, is not something that they're interested in for obvious reasons. That being said, there are requirements with the land use bylaw from Rocky View to provide best and worst case scenarios for things like parking for the staff. We are expecting at full build out about 800 to 1,500 employees, which really is not. We're still on? No, sorry.
Yeah, you're still there.
Okay, sorry. So, I mean, in relative terms, the park will not be employing a lot of people, so we don't expect the parking areas to be significant. But that said, we will have to provide security for the folks that are going to be working there. All of our lighting treatments, as a mean of a policy, we're intending them to be dark sky compliant. And what that means is obviously limiting the glare or the migration off-site of the light through downward casting fixtures, both from any of the security lighting as well as the lighting associated with the buildings, the entrances, and the signage elements of the project area. So I hope that answers the question. Definitely we have guidelines we need to work within from the land use bylaw perspective, but is low level that we can keep the lighting in this project area, the better for us.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Question. I have a few questions. I think Ray, just to get you back online, would be great to pass to you, and Ken will keep you online as well. We've answered this in a few ways, but we'll answer again, modify it a bit to make sure we're being clear. Any ideas of what type of power generation is being considered on the site? Yeah, so we'll start with that. There's a couple other questions within this one.
Yep. Yeah, no, I can take that for sure.
Yeah.
Our Cascade facility, which is a 900 megawatt facility in Edson, as I mentioned before, is what's called a combined cycle power plant, and that is the technology we would use here. It uses natural gas combusted in a gas turbine. The waste heat from that process is captured, turned into steam. That steam is then used to turn a steam turbine. It is the same technology that you'll see around. There's a number of power plants in the Calgary area using the same technology, and we would be applying the same type of technology here.
Thanks. And second part to this question, I think we mentioned this again before, but we'll mention it again. What are the plans for this data center and its cooling? How will data centers be cooled at the site?
Yeah, we did speak to that. It's difficult exactly to know. I know that eStructure, they do have a plan. They'll be discussing it on the 9th for their cooling. I know they are very committed to minimizing their cooling and their water usage and their cooling requirements. Future going forward, we don't know because we don't know who the client is, we don't know what the application is, and we don't know how the technology, both the efficiency of the processors or the efficiency of the cooling systems, will evolve over time. They will all probably have the ability to take advantage of what they call free cooling or using the cold air to cool at times, and that's a function of being in Alberta. But we don't know exactly what the cooling systems will be for the future. If they do require water or more than or a continuous amount of water, then that would be subject, as we said, to the studies and the water use demand studies that we'd have to do at that time.
Thanks, Ray. And a couple more questions for you as well. So we have mentioned a few times one of the Alberta advantages in terms of cooling, just due to our climate. But do we have any understanding that this is a global need and that there are data centers being built globally? How does this project's cost compare to other projects in other countries? This particular attendee mentioned China, but how are our costs in Alberta compared to other global costs of data centers?
Yeah, I can't speak to China specifically. I know that we do have an advantage on power prices, and if we were talking about US companies, there is an advantage on the exchange rate. I know that a lot of the clients we talk to are looking all over the world, and they are looking at other colder climates as well to take advantage of that and get away from the kind of the deep south US heating load. So I know that given the interest in data centers in Alberta, we are cost competitive. I can't say specifically how we rate against other specific jurisdictions, but we are cost competitive.
Thanks, Ray. Ken, did you want to add to that, or do you have any?
No, I was curious if Pierce had that calculation. Put you on the spot, Pierce, in terms of the expected annual non-residential assessment that we can be generating on site at full build out.
Oh, you're muted, Pierce.
Sorry, I think it'd be better with the mute button by now. So of the 4.6 billion, I believe that's been referenced in our study and in the presentation today, 4 of that is non-residential assessment, and about 600 million is related to residential growth.
But would you be able to calculate, like based on the mill rate, the 2024 mill rate, what the 4 billion assessed value would produce in actual tax?
Yes, yeah, I believe earlier I committed to making that calculation and sharing it with the group.
Oh, you're going to get it and we'll share it later. I thought maybe you'd have it now. Okay, gotcha.
A couple questions related to the power plant or and power to the site. So one question coming in, ISO has delegated 1200 megawatts to data centers by September 11th, and then not anymore until the 2028. Do you have the power delegated to you for phase 1? Is that something that's secured? Oh, Ray, you're muted too now.
It's not public as to the distribution of that 1,200 megawatts yet, so it's not for me, and that's for the ISO to divulge. I will say that we did get an allocation sufficient to start our phase one. And the discussion we had around the power plant is in relation to that 2028. So the ISO has deemed that 1,200 megawatts as their phase one. Phase two, which all other applicants, all other data centers will then go into phase two. All of that will require new generation.
Okay, fair. And there's more questions related to power generation. So actually, and this is a good question for you, Ray. So in the map of the phases where the power plant will be constructed, it's the comment is 1,000 megawatts is fairly large. The Cascade plant is 52 hectares. You know, is this the correct scale, I guess, is what they were asking in terms of space?
Well, the Cascade facility does not have carbon capture on it, and this one would at least have to have the ability to add it, depending on what the and I mentioned the federal regulations, depending on where those are at the time, we would at least have to have some sort of carbon mitigation strategy for this facility, which, if it's deemed to be carbon capture, would take up as much room as the power plant itself. So we are leaving ourselves some, flexibility there as we design the plant. There will also be, stormwater and all that, and parking and extra facilities, but it does have to keep enough room for carbon capture.
Thanks. And this is a very broad question, if I'm reading it correctly. We had a question come in from an anonymously about what happens to the power generation plant when we run out of natural gas. I think that's a pretty big.
Well, if we run out of natural gas, it stops running. But I think inherent in the question is, what if we run out of natural gas?
What if,
Yeah. And there's no, our forecast suggests that we're not going to run out of natural gas anytime soon. Certainly within the 20 or 30 years that a natural gas power plant's natural life would be.
Another question you have mentioned carbon capture a few times, Ray. Do you have how are you capturing carbon? The method or the technology you're using for?
Sure. There's a number of methods. Typically, the one that's been adopted most broadly for power is a post-combustion amine system, where the flue gas that would normally go up the stack would then be diverted through a carbon capture facility. There's a number of companies that have those technologies, and the carbon, through a chemical process that I can't really describe, is captured, compressed, and then pumped underground. And Alberta also has lots of opportunity to store this underground, and that is something that the provincial government is working on frameworks for those. And if anybody's been following the carbon hub process that the government's been promoting, that's reflective of that. So it's captured from the exhaust and then pumped underground, and it becomes part of the substrate and stays there in perpetuity.
Okay, thanks. When you use carbon capture, then is there possible then that there might be impact on groundwater wells? And will there be any requirements to start monitoring prior to the development?
The storage of carbon is done in certain geologic, and I can't speak to the geology. Salt caverns are one of them that could be 50 kilometers away. It's not going to be something that's done right under us. It would be done through one of these carbon hubs, and we would contract that as a service, and all the monitoring required to do that safely would be managed by that facility's license. And again, it's not like it's going to be put underground at our facility.
Okay. And perhaps maybe, Ray, if you don't mind, do you want to explain maybe some of the regulatory or approval process and like that any type of facility would have to undergo briefly?
For the carbon?
Or no, for the power plant or.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. So power generation in Alberta is regulated by the Alberta Utility Commission. It requires a number of studies, actually. Rob, if you can chime in.
Mhm.
Very similar to the studies we've done here: environment, noise, emissions. Rob, you have anything? Rob's our environmental lead, so he's
Yeah,
the
no, you've covered all the high points of the application. And that applicate, well, I mean, those applications are involve a rigorous stakeholder consultation
Yeah.
and and a lot of environmental work as well.
Thanks.
a separate approval process from an area structure plan. It's AUC.
Okay, great. Just a clarification question that you mentioned the lifespan of a power plant as being 20 years. This attendee is curious, then what happens? What's after that?
20 to 30.
Okay.
It would be I mean, there's a lot of possibilities once you've got the infrastructure. It could be rebuilt, given a second life. They will run longer than that, but not necessarily in the same function like as a base loaded plant, because they start to get older. And you can see that there's some older plants in northern Calgary or northern Rocky View that don't run like as much as they used to because they're less efficient. So what happens then will depend largely on the technology of the day and whether a replacement gas plant will be needed or some other technology would take over.
Yeah, thank you. And we are at the top of the hour, so I want to get to one. We have a few more questions, but I want to get to one question. And Pierce has his hands up. So maybe Pierce and Catherine, if you just want to unmute and I have a question coming your way, Catherine.
Hi, I just
Go ahead, Pierce. Yeah.
Thanks. Following up on the calculation, if you applied the 2024 mill rates to the assessed value of the project, you'd end up with a tax bill in the order of about 14 million.
And that's a yearly, you mean year, right, in a year?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Pierce. Ken and Catherine, we did have a question that came in about, and Ray too, if the data center client will be speaking on September 9th about specifics of operations, why not now? We'd like to review some of that information early. So I just want to address that in terms of just timing generally. So, there are a lot of, generally with the project, there are going to be quite a few phases of development and subsequent approvals put in place. So, we do have the one e-structures that is available that is able to speak to phase one. So there is also subsequent things that are being asked in terms of the whole site that have been evaluated through our technical studies and have been evaluated and will continue to be monitored as the development continues. But if Ken or Catherine or Ray, you want to jump in to address that comment that came through?
I think Ray might be best to address that, just in terms of them speaking on the 9th.
Yeah, they're speaking on the 9th in support of the project, but today we felt was about the entire, not just about them. I mean, they're going to have their own development plan and their own plans, but this is about the whole plant. So we can't represent that the entire plant, or sorry, the entire facility is an e-structure facility. That would be misleading. So we have to put it in context. This is a park. There will be there will be future clients. We have checks and balances within the approval process to make sure that those developments follow the area structure plan. But it's not an e-structure facility, if you will. On the 9th, they'll be there in support of the overall, and they will be able to speak to some of their plans. They do have a good website with lots of information about the things they're doing from an environmental perspective and commitments on water and whatnot. And I invite you to check that out. But it's important to separate the two, I think, in my mind, that this is about the overall area structure plan.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, Ray, I mean, legislatively, the purpose of an area structure plan is to set in place the overall framework upon which, a council and a development authority, i.e. administration, are going to be making decisions on future subdivisions and development permits that will span, 15 to 20 years. So again, as Ray mentioned, we've done the sort of, I won't call it preliminary work, but the appropriate scale of planning and technical evaluation to support the area structure plan, the broad framework. A whole bunch more work is yet to come. whether it's e-structure, it's data center operator XYZ. There'll be lots of opportunities for residents to get involved and to gain more information and more insight about each specific phase of the project.
Thank you. We do have a few more questions that have come in. I do respect the time as well, so I know people will have to head out. I believe some of you that have joined us today are also coming this evening, so we look forward to seeing you in person this evening as well. And we also, again, to reiterate Ken's comments, we appreciate you taking the lunch hour, joining us, asking these questions, and participating in the process. I will maybe get to a few more of these questions just before we officially end the webinar, because they are on different topics than we've covered. If there's a few more on water, please do keep emailing the project team. We're happy to respond. We had a question come in about health and health impacts for surrounding residents. And this particular participant's wondering if there's been any studies about electromagnetic fields, air quality, and impacts that a project like this have in terms of other health impacts outside of some of the topics we've discussed, like noise and lighting and traffic. And Rob, did you want to?
Sure, I can speak to that. There's been no studies that have shown negative health impacts from data centers to date. As far as EMF is basically like an electromagnetic field generated by electrical use, and your fields are shown to be a lot smaller the further you get away from the distance. So the data centers, are not going to be in proximity to people. The distance will be greater than the EMFs generated in your house.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, and again, and these are facilities where employees come to work. They are safe. So they are. It is something that Kineticor and data center operators take very seriously. So appreciate the question. I just want to make sure I've covered other questions that maybe we haven't gotten to yet. A comment just towards Rocky View County, I'll just share the comment that this resident feels like there's been a lack of benefit from some of the large commercial ventures that haven't really brought benefit to residents, that there are still enormous taxes. Some community members have no treated water or wastewater. So just a comment on that. And that, there's often, whereas big industries will often be able to tie into some of those services. So I don't know, Ken, if you wanted to maybe just address maybe sort of how Daryl's gone, he had a meeting, but if you want to talk a little bit about how some sites do tie in and the costs that the developers bear.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are questions probably more appropriately raised with your area representatives on council, but certainly, from a potable water perspective, we have had some conversations with our immediately adjacent neighbors, and specifically, there's a few folks on Ranger 282 that have indicated that if possible, if this project does get approved, the fact that we're going to be running distribution mains right by their property, where there'll be opportunities for them to connect into. And again, a little bit beyond our privé to make commitments on stuff like this, but certainly if there's ways that we can facilitate that, absolutely we will do that. Other things like, the irrigation water, would there be potential opportunities for folks adjacent to our site to take that treated stormwater for use of irrigation on their lands? I think anything's on the table at this point, but in terms of the benefits coming to the municipality, I can tell you that Rocky View, at least from my perspective, and Aaron can confirm this or deny it, Rocky View is certainly blessed with the investment opportunities that have historically come into the county over the last 20, 30 years, relative to other jurisdictions in the province that don't have the ability to balance the residential and non-residential assessment. So
yeah, and Ken, I would reiterate that that's a very good conversation to have with your local municipal elected official. And I think that the county, if you look at that long-term financial projection in terms of the revenue potential for the project, it seems reasonable that revenue would benefit residents, over the long term. How that's defined, yet to be determined, but certainly a significant opportunity for county residents to benefit from a development of this nature.
Thanks. With that, we've gotten to most of the questions, and those that we haven't, we'll make sure to follow up with participants. Again, comments generally about, the fact that, there's concern about taking this land out of agricultural use and changing it. So we appreciate those comments. Again, a few questions, very specific questions about things like carbon capture, some more details. So we appreciate that. And we also do appreciate, we did, also get the question in terms of, what type of compensation is planned for neighbors and what will happen if there's a decrease in land values. And Ken, I don't know if you wanted to just mention that quickly or discuss that quickly, in terms of, land use process and how things unfold.
Yeah, obviously a very sensitive topic for a lot of the folks in proximity to our site. And, I don't think we can, from our perspective, guarantee or provide any certainty on whether land values will increase or in fact decrease. I think that the landowners, our perspective, the landowners directly adjacent to our site certainly will have impacts. We've worked really hard and had conversations with everybody who would meet with us that's certainly tangent to our property about how we can best mitigate through the buffering, the landscaping, potential service connections, etc. But I think, other opportunities for the value-added agriculture opportunities, would that potentially make lands either more valuable or less valuable? I think depending on your own perspective, you could bring a different focus. I think that, if there is loss in value, by far that net loss will be made up by the assessment generated through the project. Again, does that help the person that might be impacted? Arguably yes, arguably no. But I think, kind of given I'll say a politician's answer to the question, I don't think we have any certainty one way or another that would say that the lands are going to be devalued or have an increase. All we can say is we've done our best to offer mitigations, propose a land use concept, a phasing strategy to try to limit the negative impact on the folks that are directly going to be impacted by the project.
And if I can just add about the noise and light standards, we would be meeting the rural standards that the regulatory bodies have set up, not the urban, because this is located in a rural area.
Thanks, all. Any final comments from the project team before we start to wrap? We appreciate all the questions and everyone's time joining the session today.
Yeah, great. And if folks are able to come out tonight to the Kineticor Hall, we'll be giving the same presentation, and we certainly look forward to engaging with you further at that point.
Yeah. And again, one question came in about the recording. We'll be placing this recording on our website along with the presentation, and as well as, just some updated FAQ comments that have come through recently. So someone was asking when the recording would be available to view. Most likely before the end of the week. Today's Wednesday, so we will be trying to get it up tomorrow or Friday. So thanks very much. Appreciate the comments and questions, and we're available. So if you need to get a hold of us, you can access us through our website. My contact information is available, as well as Ken's, and we are open to taking all questions and points of clarification as needed. So do keep reaching out, and we've appreciated those of you who have reached out through the process so far.
Great.
Thanks all.
Thanks everyone.
Have a good afternoon.
I know.